You don't smell it at first. That's the first thing nobody tells you about arriving in medieval London. The city hits your nose long before it hits your eyes. A thick, living wall of rot, smoke, animal waste, and something else underneath all of it. Something sweet and wrong. Something your body recognizes as dangerous before your mind can process what it is. It's June. The year is 1348, and the smell you can't quite name yet? That's death. And it's already everywhere. You've arrived by boat along the Thames, the way most people arrive in London this year. The river is crowded. Merchant vessels from Gascony, Flanders, and the Low Countries jostle for position at the docks. Men shout in languages you half recognize. Gulls scream overhead. The water is the color of dirty pewter, thick with refuse, carrying everything the city doesn't want downstream. You step onto the dock at Billingsgate, and your feet sink slightly into mud that you will quickly learn not to think too hard about. London, in this moment, is home to somewhere between 60,000 and 80,000 people. It is the largest city in England. It is noisy and filthy and alive in a way that no city in the modern world can quite replicate. That specific kind of aliveness that comes when every single person around you is working hard just to survive the week. Most of them will not survive the year. You don't know that yet. Neither do they. Day 1. June 1348. The plague has not yet reached London. That sentence sounds like relief. Hold on to it, because it won't last long. The city you're walking into right now is already operating on borrowed time. Ships have been arriving from the continent all spring, from France, from the ports of Gascony, from the Mediterranean trade routes, and each one carried something invisible in the holds along with the wine and the wool and the grain. Merchants who unloaded cargo at Bristol several weeks ago are already sick. The disease has been moving north and east through England like a slow tide, and London, the beating heart of the kingdom, the place all roads lead to and all ships sail toward, is exactly where it's headed. But today the city doesn't know. You walk up from the docks through Eastcheap and the street is packed. This is not the carefully planned urban density of a modern city. This is organic, chaotic, human chaos. Buildings leaning toward each other overhead until they nearly touch. Upper floors jutting out over the street on timber frames blocking the sky. The lanes are barely wide enough for a cart to pass. Everything is built right up against everything else, wood against wood, thatch against thatch. The whole thing a tinderbox waiting for a spark. But fire is not what's coming. The street vendors are shouting. A butcher hangs dressed carcasses in his open doorway, flies already working. A woman sells meat pies from a tray strapped to her neck. A man argues loudly with a grain merchant about price. Children run through the legs of adults, bare feet in the mud. A dog lies in the center of the lane, apparently unbothered by the foot traffic moving around it. The noise is extraordinary. You walk past the Church of St. Mary at Hill, and a group of men in dark robes are gathered at the door. Priests or men who look like priests. They're speaking quietly to each other. One of them is holding a letter. Their faces are serious in a way that stands out even in a crowd of serious people. The letter, if you could read it, would be from the Bishop of Bath and Wells. He has written to his clergy, asking them to hear confessions from the dying, because the disease moving through the west of England is so fast that there aren't enough priests to attend to everyone. He has suggested, tentatively and with evident discomfort, that in cases of extreme necessity, a layperson, or even a woman, might hear a dying man's confession. The Church of England does not make accommodations like this, ever. The men at the door of St. Mary's are beginning to understand that whatever is coming is not an ordinary thing. You keep walking. You need to find somewhere to sleep. You need to eat. You need to figure out how medieval London works, because you are going to be here for a week, and every single decision you make over the next 7 days will matter. You find a lodging in a narrow house off Cheapside, above a tanner's workshop. The room has a straw mattress on a wooden frame, a small shuttered window, and a smell that the open window does not help with. You pay the landlady in coin. She eyes you with the permanent suspicion of someone who has been cheated before and expects to be cheated again, and she gives you a tallow candle and a clay pot for your needs at night. You do not ask what to do with the pot in the morning. You have already figured that out. The bed has fleas. You will know this by morning. But for now you lie in the dark and listen to London. The city never fully sleeps. There are night watchmen calling the hours, dogs barking, the occasional crash of something being dropped or thrown. Somewhere close by, a baby is crying. Somewhere further away, a man is singing, something slow and melancholy in the local dialect. You think, 1 week. I just have to make it 1 week. You fall asleep without knowing that 2 days ago in a village in Dorset, an entire family of 6 died within 48 hours of each other. The disease is moving at roughly 2 miles per day. London is approximately 120 miles from Dorset. The math is simple. The outcome is not. Day 2. You wake up itching. The fleas from the straw mattress have found you enthusiastically. You have 6 bites on your left arm, 4 on your right, and 1 on your neck that you will scratch for the rest of the week. This is going to be a persistent source of misery, and you should know right now that there is nothing you can do about it. Fleas are simply part of the texture of existence in 1348. Every person around you lives with them. The wealthy have better mattresses stuffed with wool or feathers, but even wealthy people have fleas. Even the king's court has fleas. Fleas are, as it happens, medically significant right now. Fleas are how the plague spreads. Specifically, fleas that have fed on infected rats and then move on to feed on humans. The bacterium Yersinia pestis travels from the rat to the flea to the human in a sequence so efficient it seems almost engineered. Nobody in London in 1348 knows this. The theory of disease in medieval Europe is dominated by miasma, the idea that bad air carries illness. Rotting organic matter, swamp gas, the smell of corpses, all of these produce miasmatic air that enters the body and causes disease. This is why London already smells the way it does, and why this is considered simply normal and not a public health emergency. Bad smells are everywhere. If bad smells cause disease, everyone would always be sick. Well, everyone is about to be very sick. But here's what's interesting about the miasma theory from a practical perspective. It actually produces some useful behaviors. People who believe bad air is the problem will try to counteract it with good smells, burning aromatic herbs, carrying posies of flowers, keeping fires burning to purify the air. Some physicians recommend smoking herbs as a prophylactic. None of this stops the plague, but some of it provides psychological comfort and occasionally incidental benefits. Keeping smoke around does reduce some insect populations. It's just not enough. Nothing is going to be enough. You spend the morning at Cheapside, which is the main commercial artery of medieval London, a wide, busy street by the standards of the city, lined with shops and stalls organized by trade. Goldsmiths cluster in one section, bread sellers in another. Cloth merchants display bolts of dyed wool and imported linen. The street has a rhythm to it that feels almost modern, the logic of commerce organizing space before any city planner ever tried to. You buy bread from a baker, a dense, dark loaf made from rye and barley, and eat it while walking. It tastes like nothing you've ever eaten from a modern bakery. It's heavy and slightly sour, and genuinely sustaining in a way that modern bread rarely is. You find a cook shop and buy a bowl of pottage, a thick vegetable stew with bits of what might be mutton floating in it, and eat it standing at a counter watching the street. The cook is a heavy-set woman in her 40s who watches you with the same expression as your landlady. Not unfriendly exactly, but measuring. You are obviously not from here. Your clothes are wrong. Your speech patterns are wrong. You don't have the deep tan of someone who works outdoors, and your teeth are too straight and too white. In 1348, teeth like yours are the teeth of either extreme youth or supernatural good fortune, and you are clearly not a child. People are looking at you. This is going to be a recurring problem. In 1348, London, strangers are viewed with a complex mixture of necessary commercial tolerance and deep social suspicion. London's economy depends on trade, which means it depends on outsiders. But outsiders are also potential thieves, potential spies, potential carriers of disease, potential agents of foreign powers, potential heretics. The city has mechanisms for processing outsiders. Guilds, parish registrations, letters of introduction. And if you don't fit neatly into one of those mechanisms, you become a kind of social anomaly, that people don't know quite how to handle. You handle it by smiling, keeping your eyes down and buying things. Spending coin is the universal language of 1348. In the afternoon, you find your way to the river and walk along it toward London Bridge. London Bridge in 1348 is not the quiet stone arch of tourist imagination. It is a city on a bridge, a dense built-up structure covered in shops and houses, with a drawbridge in the middle and a gate at the south end, where, if you look up at exactly the right moment, you will see the heads of executed criminals mounted on pikes. This is normal. This is decoration. This is the city communicating what happens when you cross certain lines. The bridge is crowded, a constant press of people moving in both directions: merchants, pilgrims, laborers, beggars, monks. A cart carrying barrels of ale gets stuck behind a flock of geese being herded north, and the resulting jam of human bodies and confused animals and rising tempers is something you have to physically push through to get anywhere. On the south side of the bridge in Southwark, the city's character changes almost immediately. Southwark is outside the formal jurisdiction of the City of London, which means it's where everything the city officially disapproves of goes to operate openly. Taverns and brothels and unlicensed trades and bear-baiting rings, all of it clustered in the shadow of the bridge, doing steady business. You don't go into Southwark today. You file it away as an option. You stand on the bridge and look east along the river, and you see the White Tower, the Norman keep that William the Conqueror built nearly 3 centuries ago, now surrounded by more walls, more towers, the whole complex spreading along the riverbank. The Tower of London in this year is a working royal palace and a prison and an arsenal. It's where the crown keeps its treasure and its dangerous people. It is also, you will later find out, completely incapable of protecting even its inhabitants from what's coming. Day 3. The first rumor reaches you on the 3rd day. You're at a tavern near the Church of St. Bride's, a dark, low-beamed room smelling of tallow smoke and spilled ale, and the men at the table next to you are talking in the way people talk when the news is too bad to say out loud directly. Sideways, in pieces, in the language of half-said things. There is sickness, someone says. In the West. There is always sickness in the West, someone else says. What kind of sickness? A shrug. A pause. A lowered voice. The kind that doesn't stop. Nobody uses a specific word yet. The disease doesn't have a settled English name in June of 1348. It will be called many things over the coming months. The Great Pestilence, the Great Mortality, the Plague of Florence. The name Black Death won't be standardized in English until centuries later, a retroactive naming of something too large to name while it was happening. But the men in this tavern know something is wrong. They can feel it the way you can feel a shift in weather before the clouds arrive. You listen and say nothing. If this is already making your skin crawl, good. That means it's working. If you want more of this, week-long immersions into the most terrifying moments in human history. Subscribe to the channel right now. Hit the bell so you don't miss a single video. And if you're already subscribed, leave a comment below telling me which historical moment you want to step inside next. I read every single one. The Black Death, by the time it reaches London in autumn of 1348, will kill somewhere between 30 and 60% of the city's population. Historians have debated the exact numbers for decades, and the honest answer is that nobody kept reliable records because the record keepers were dying along with everyone else. The estimates are assembled from fragmentary sources: parish burial records, property transfer documents, the accounts of monasteries that tracked the deaths of their brothers. What those fragments tell us is staggering. In some London parishes, the dead were so numerous that regular Christian burial became impossible. The traditional rites required a coffin, a priest, specific prayers, a grave in consecrated ground. Within weeks, there wouldn't be enough coffins or enough priests or enough consecrated ground to go around. The Bishop of London would eventually consecrate emergency burial grounds, mass graves essentially, dug in open fields outside the city walls. One of them, the East Smithfield Cemetery, has been excavated by archaeologists in the late 20th century. The bodies were laid carefully in rows, which tells us that even at the height of the crisis, the people burying the dead were trying to maintain some form of dignity and order. They hadn't given up on each other. That detail keeps coming back to me. They hadn't given up on each other. Day 4. You have developed a routine the way humans develop routines even in the most chaotic circumstances, because routine is how we convince ourselves we have some control over what's happening around us. Morning. Buy bread and something hot from the cook shop. Walk the city while it's still relatively uncrowded. Take note of what's changing. Things are changing. The mood on the streets is different than it was 2 days ago. Not panicked? Nothing as dramatic as that yet, but tighter. The easy morning chatter between neighbors has a different quality. People are standing closer to their doors than usual. A beggar who was a fixture outside the Church of St. Michael on Cornhill is gone, either moved on or dead, and you have no way to know which. You visit the church. The priest inside is conducting a service for a small congregation. Fewer than a dozen people kneeling on the stone floor. You stand at the back and watch. The Latin prayers wash over you, familiar in rhythm if not entirely in meaning. The priest is young, maybe 30, and his face has the look of a man who has been given information he doesn't know what to do with. After the service, you manage a brief conversation with a clerk attached to the church, a thin man with ink stains on his fingers who speaks slowly and carefully once he determines you're not entirely incomprehensible. He tells you that letters have arrived from the bishop. Prayers are being organized. Special masses for protection. The church's response to the approaching plague is, at this point, largely liturgical. Increase the spiritual defenses, intensify the prayers, invoke the protection of saints. Saint Sebastian, martyred by arrows, is a patron of plague victims because his body, struck by many arrows, is seen as analogous to a body struck by disease. Saint Roch, who according to hagiography nursed plague victims and was himself miraculously healed, will become enormously popular over the coming years. But the theological question underneath all this is one that the Church is struggling with privately, even while maintaining a composed public face. If the plague is God's punishment for the sins of humanity, and most theological opinion in 1348 holds that it must be, then how do you pray your way out of it? You can't argue with God's justice. You can only hope that sufficient penitence might soften it. The psychological weight of that position, when you really sit with it, is almost unbearable. You are living in a moment when an entire civilization believes that the catastrophe befalling it is their own fault, that they somehow deserve this. That the correct response to mass death is to examine your own soul more carefully. Day 5, you see the first body on the 5th day. It happens quickly and quietly, the way death usually does. You're walking through a lane near the river when you notice a small gathering, 4 or 5 people standing around a doorway speaking in low voices. A woman is sitting on the ground against the wall of the house, her head in her hands. A man is carrying something out of the doorway wrapped in cloth. You don't get close enough to see clearly. You don't need to. What you notice as you pass at a careful distance is not the fact of the death. People die in London every day from 100 different causes, but the faces of the people watching, the specific quality of fear in them. This is not the face you make when your neighbor dies of a fever or a bad winter. This is a different kind of fear, a colder and more total kind. 2 hours later, on the other side of the city, you see another gathering, same quality of stillness in the bystanders, same woman sitting with her head in her hands. The disease, when it manifests, does so in several forms. The form that gives the plague one of its later names, the bubonic form, produces the symptoms that will become the defining image of this catastrophe in historical imagination. The buboes, swollen lymph nodes in the groin, the armpit, the neck. Hot to the touch, hard and agonizing. In some cases they grow as large as an apple or an egg, pressing against skin and nerve with a pressure that the surviving accounts describe as almost unendurable. Beyond the buboes, fever, chills, headache, nausea, the skin darkening in patches from subcutaneous bleeding, which is where the black in Black Death likely comes from, though again, that name comes later. The time from first symptoms to death is typically between 3 and 7 days, but there are other forms. The pneumonic form, which infects the lungs and spreads through respiratory droplets, actual breath, is more lethal and faster. Survivors describe coughing up blood, a rapid deterioration, death within 24 to 48 hours. And the septicemic form, where the bacteria enter the bloodstream directly, can kill before any external symptoms even appear. The physicians of 1348 are seeing all of these, often in the same household, and they have no framework to explain why the same disease seems to behave so differently in different people. They don't know about bacterial strains or immune response or the specific routes of infection. They're watching people die in multiple different ways, and they're doing their best to find a pattern that makes sense. Some of their explanations, considered from inside the worldview of 1348, are actually sophisticated and thoughtful. The medical faculty of Paris will publish an official analysis in October of this year, commissioned by the French king, attributing the plague to a particular conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in 1345, a celestial alignment that corrupted the air and produced the miasmatic conditions conducive to disease. Astrological medicine is not superstition in 1348. It is the cutting edge of scientific thought, the intersection of empirical observation and theoretical framework, the best model available for explaining why things happen in patterns. The model is wrong, but the impulse behind it, find the pattern, name the cause, create a framework for response, is exactly the same impulse that drives modern epidemiology. They were not stupid. They were working without the right tools. Day 6. The city is beginning to change visibly. Some shops are closed that were open 5 days ago. The street in front of a building near the Church of All Hallows has been marked with something, a bundle of straw hanging from the door frame, or something tied to the lintel, the specific sign that will evolve over the coming months into the red cross painted on doors of infected houses. There is still commerce, there is still noise, but the texture of the noise is different. Fewer vendors shouting, fewer people stopping to gossip, more purposeful movement, with eyes slightly down. The beggars have changed their appeals. Where they were asking for alms for hunger before, now some of them are talking about sickness in the vicinity, invoking the mercy of God, creating a kind of street-level early warning system that is more accurate than anything the city's official structures are producing. You see a procession moving through the street, a group of flagellants, men and women in dark robes moving in a line, some of them striking themselves or each other with leather straps. This particular group, at this particular moment, may be one of the earliest of what will become a widespread and alarming movement across Europe over the next 2 years. The Brethren of the Cross, as they'll be called, believe that the only way to stop God's punishment is to take on penance of unprecedented severity, to literally bleed for sin, publicly, as a demonstration of sincere contrition. The Church will eventually condemn the flagellant movement as heretical and excessive, but at this moment, watching this particular group move through this street with this particular expression on their faces, you understand exactly why it's happening. When the thing you're afraid of is total and incomprehensible, extreme action feels like the only proportionate response. The human psyche will pay almost any price to feel like it's doing something. By midday, you hear something that makes your blood run cold. There's a meeting happening, not an official one, but the kind of informal gathering that happens in the back rooms of taverns and the yards of large houses when the official channels feel inadequate. A group of merchants and guild representatives and parish wardens are talking about what to do, who to blame, how to explain this. Some are talking about the Jews. This is the part of the history that doesn't have a way to be softened. In city after city across Europe during the Black Death, Jewish communities, already marginalized, already constrained by law and custom to live separately and work in only certain trades, are accused of causing the plague. The accusation takes different forms in different places: poisoning wells, conspiring with foreign powers, dark rituals, calculated murder of Christian populations. None of it is true. None of it has ever been true. But the accusation is functional in a way that's horrible to acknowledge. It takes a catastrophe with no human cause and gives it one. It converts a tragedy into a crime. And crimes have perpetrators, and perpetrators can be punished. And punishment gives the punishers the feeling, false but desperately needed, that they have done something about it. London's Jewish community had actually been expelled from England by Edward I in 1290, nearly 60 years before this moment. So London in 1348 doesn't have the Jewish population that German and French and Italian cities do. The pogroms that will devastate Jewish communities across the Rhineland, the massacres at Strasbourg and Mainz and Cologne, don't have the same direct expression in England, but the scapegoating impulse is present in the conversation you're half hearing at the edge of this gathering. It's present in the way people talk about foreigners, about travelers from the south, about anyone who arrived recently from somewhere else. You think about how recently you arrived from somewhere else, with a different accent and teeth that are too straight. You leave the gathering and walk quickly back to your lodging. Day 7, your last day. You wake before dawn, which at this latitude in June means you wake in the dark for a very short time before the sky lightens. The city is almost quiet, almost never completely. A dog is barking somewhere. A cart is moving in the distance. You pack the few things you brought with you. You settle with the landlady, who takes your coin and doesn't ask where you're going. She has the look of someone who has already started the quiet mental calculation of how many of her lodgers will be gone in 3 months. You walk to the river as the city wakes up around you. The Thames in the early morning has a different quality. The light is low and horizontal, catching the surface of the water in silver sheets. Boats are beginning to move. A fisherman is casting a line from the bank. Somewhere across the water in Southwark, a church bell is ringing for prime. The first of the canonical hours, the morning prayer. You stand there and you look at this city that doesn't know what's about to happen to it. 60,000 people, maybe 80,000. And by the spring of 1349, somewhere between a third and a half of them will be dead. The death toll across England over the course of the Black Death, roughly 1348 to 1351, with recurrences throughout the second half of the century, will be somewhere between 30 and 50% of the entire population. Some estimates go higher. Some regions are hit worse than others. Some villages lose everyone. Some monasteries lose every single monk. And yet, what happens on the other side of this catastrophe is not what you might expect. The survivors, and there are survivors always even in the worst-hit communities, don't simply rebuild the world they had before. They can't. There aren't enough of them to maintain the old social structures. The labor shortage that results from losing a third of your workforce in 2 years is so severe that it begins to destabilize the feudal order. Peasants who survived the plague find themselves, for the first time in English history, in a position to bargain. There isn't enough labor. Lords have to compete for workers. Wages rise. Serfs walk away from their manors and find better conditions elsewhere. The legal response, the Statute of Labourers of 1351, which tried to freeze wages at pre-plague levels and legally bind workers to their manors, fails repeatedly because you cannot legislate away the basic economics of supply and demand when the supply of human labor has been catastrophically reduced. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381, a genuine popular uprising against the social order, has many causes, but the labor and economic disruptions that trace directly back to the Black Death are central among them. The Black Death is one of the most catastrophic events in human history. It's also, counterintuitively, one of the engines of the transformation that will eventually become the modern world. Not because catastrophe is good, it isn't. Because the social structures that couldn't survive the catastrophe deserve to fall, and the catastrophe broke them open. The people who died didn't deserve to die. The upheaval didn't require the death. But humanity, always and everywhere, finds a way to build something in the ruins. You take a boat across the river as the morning fills with noise and smell and the chaotic energy of a city beginning another day. You watch London from the water as it recedes. The spires of the churches, the buildings jostling for position, the smoke already rising from morning fires, the sound of it all carrying across the water, commerce and argument and prayer and children, and the eternal sound of a city that does not know what's coming and would not stop, not even for a moment, even if it did. There is something unbearable and something extraordinary about that. The fisherman is still casting his line. A woman is hanging washing from an upper floor window. 2 men are arguing good-naturedly about something. You can't hear the words across the distance, just the rhythm of it, the familiar music of 2 people disagreeing. They are all going to live through something that will break the world they know. Most of them are going to die, and the ones who survive are going to build something new. That's the oldest human story there is. It's not a comfortable one. It doesn't have a clean resolution. But it is true, and it has been true every single time. And the people of London in 1348, living out the last ordinary weeks of their ordinary world, deserve to be seen. Not as historical backdrop, not as a cautionary tale, as people. They had fleas in their beds and bread that was heavy and sour, and a river that smelled like everything they'd thrown into it. They had theology instead of microbiology, and astrology instead of epidemiology, and fear instead of vaccines. They had each other, which is both less than enough and everything that mattered. They were afraid. They loved people. They got up in the morning anyway. So do we. If you made it to the end of this, thank you, genuinely. This kind of history isn't easy to sit with, and you sat with it. If this video affected you in any way, if it made you think or feel or see your own time differently, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me what moved you most. Was it the people, the medicine, the economics, the resilience? Tell me. Every single comment shapes the next video. Like this video if you want more immersive historical storytelling, and share it with one person who needs to be reminded that humans have survived worse than they thought possible and kept building anyway. What would you have done differently if you'd known what was coming? And more importantly, what are you doing right now in your own time with the knowledge you already have? See you in the next one.